right, everyone, welcome back. That was a fun conversation we had about zero ETL. And now we have some incredible additional guests joining us here today. So we're going to be talking about one of, I'm sure, a topic everybody has heard of before on generative AI here a little bit. I mean, has everyone heard of that? But before we do, and before we get into the topic, I'd like to have our guests do a quick intro to themselves here. So why don't we start, John, here?
Okay. Hey, everyone. John Mallory, go-to-market specialist for storage, focused on analytics and AI/ML, which the reasons for that will hopefully become more apparent as we talk through this. Been at AWS 8 years.
All right, cool. Laura.
And I'm Laura Shepard, and I work with John as a storage specialist on the storage team and on Gen AI/ML storage.
All right, so we teased two things here. Storage, which we were just talking about in the prior segment, so I love this kind of great juxtaposition of these two segments.
It's like
here.
It was planned, almost.
You know, sometimes we're good planners.
Almost, sometimes.
But I think there a lot of folks are doing work with AI/ML out there. But we talk a lot about just AI/ML features. But here, I think we have the opportunity to talk about how to act on that data that is being stored, and that's a key element on how to use the data. So maybe we should start at the beginning here with a quick introduction, John and Laura, for exactly what we're talking about with regard to AI and storage here in the future.
A lot of people are challenged by how to get started with generative AI. You hear a lot, right? But how does it actually apply to my business? How does it apply to what I'm doing, right? Like, how is it going to make my life better?
And how can I use it, right? And how can I have data.
Yeah.
How do I do something with it? And frankly, one of the best ways to do something with that data is probably AI/ML, because you have a large data set. It's not as easy to just run a SQL query, which we were talking, and get a result. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the first association which you guys have just made. That for a lot of people that just are laser focused on the Gen AI app, they don't think about what goes behind that application, right? It's just like, I'm going to build my app, use my foundation model, power up Bedrock, and I'm good. But it really comes down to how to use your data to customize for what you're trying to do and really drive differentiated value. And so that's why storage and data are so fundamental to Gen AI. So the first step is really, you just need to think about your data strategy, because you may have a big S3 bucket, or your data may live all over today, and you need to think about, what data do I need to drive the outcomes both near term but also longer term, and to formulate that data strategy in almost a roadmap of assessing what you have, deciding what you don't have, and then how you're going to acquire and integrate it. And that's really why this linkage between S3 and data lakes and Gen AI/ML is, because you build a modern data foundation, and now you can quickly iterate around that. Because, as we all know, this is just evolving super rapidly, both in the models that are coming out and what people are doing with it. So it's about rapid experimentation.
Yeah, and you need to be fairly nimble with the data that you have.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is you also have to be, in some cases, prepared for some level of failure that happens, right? You have to analyze the data. Is this right? And then do additional work with that data in order to make a decision, right?
Yeah.
Yes, but we call that learning, not failure. Learning.
Yeah.
You're right. That is a much better phrase. I'm adopting it from now on.
There you go.
Yeah, I've had many learnings in my life, Laura.
That's a valuable learnings.
I've had a lot of valuable learnings. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
The old adage, right? Garbage in, garbage out. That still applies, I think, and even more so in this world of ML and AI, where your data becomes incredibly important for accentuating what these foundation models can do, right? They can do a lot already, but to truly derive the value that I think people are looking for, I love that you said that, John. The data strategy is really key, right? Not having a good handle on what data you already have and how that data is being used can't do much beyond that, right?
Right. Yeah, you can't decide what next to do, how to optimize your your fundamental practices. Sorry,
what's next?
It really drives how much customization investment you're going to do, right? Because on the one hand, you have these kind of high-value problems and opportunities in the organization you want to address with Gen AI for purpose ML, and on the other hand, you have this private data right? And if you have private data that's well organized, as John was saying, right, and accessible in a data lake and protected and all of that stuff, you can access it easily to add value to one of these high value targets you have. And the more that's the case, the more likely you are to customize. And that's going to change how you invest in what you're actually doing. So when you say, how are you getting started? One of the first things you want to do is look at what are my high value problems and opportunities in my organization I want to start with, right? And then how am I going to get my feet wet? Where do I have really high value data to apply? Versus where am I going to just use something pre-trained off the shelf with none of my own private data?
Right. And there's a difference as to when you need to, when you want to do one or versus the other as well, right? So, so what are some of the other key considerations when people are building that first generative AI application that they need to consider?
Okay, yeah. So they've got all this data. Let's say they've got their data strategy, kind of their North Star of where they want to go.
Right.
You really need to catalog the data, right? Because, to your point about learning, it's about how you're going to go through and experiment, run a lot of rapid experimentation, look at the accuracy you're getting, and then choose different data sets and fit it until you start to get where you want to go. So you need a catalog to do that. But then also you really need data preparation tools, because as you get more sophisticated, you may start off just using prompting, and then probably RAG, but ultimately, if you're going to move up the value chain of Gen AI, you're going to do pre-training, fine-tuning, and you have to start to do a lot of data prep to do those, both labeled data, choosing the right unlabeled data sets in the right formats. So, you need to build these data pipelines, which, if you're going to do analytics in your business, you've already done this. And then finally, you need to think about governance. I mean, every day.
Yeah.
Who's touching what, right?
Who's touching what?
How can I prove?
And then
where did it come from? Yeah.
Right, and where did it come from?
Particularly, whose voice are you using?
Right.
But but governance is just a huge thorny issue, and so really, you need to have a robust security and governance strategy, which ultimately comes down, interesting tie into the last conversation, to storing a lot of log data about what's going on in your environment.
Yeah, to the earlier conversation is sometimes you now have to go back and take a look at what happened, when it happened, and you may need that for these governance discussions as well, too, that we were talking about before, which is a whole different topic we don't have enough time to get into today. But
it sounds like the tooling becomes vastly important in this stage also, because during that experimentation, right, you have to have easy access to the data. You have to be able to go in there and start, running those experiments with the tools that, your data engineers are used to, right?
Yeah.
So when you're setting this up, for people who are maybe unfamiliar with the ML stack at AWS, what are those tools that I should be looking at, right? Obviously, S3 sitting there is the data lake. What am I connecting to with it?
No, I mean, first off, if you're just building your first Gen AI apps, I'm going to strongly recommend you go with Bedrock.
Sure.
I mean, it gives you a wide choice of models, both AWS and third party. It's tightly integrated with your data in S3 and automates a lot of the process of iterating with your data and using your data to customize. And then ultimately back to governance. It has a lot of key features like guardrails and, invocation logging and storing, so you can kind of look at the chain of what happened when and why it happened. And so it's really going to be your fast on-ramp. And then as you get more sophisticated, you're probably going to use tools like Glue and SageMaker Canvas to do a lot of your data preparation as you start to get more customized. And the most important thing is you're doing this within your enterprise perimeter of data, so the data doesn't leave. It's your own customized version of the model. So it's all done securely where you really can feel comfortable using your private data to do this.
Yeah. And for those who have never used or experimented with Bedrock, one, I highly encourage you to John's point, to take a look at it. And also just to reference the work that we have done here on this Twitch channel is we've also done a few demos using Bedrock as well. So you can go back into our history on the Twitch side here and take a look at some live demos using Bedrock as well for those who are a little bit less experienced having used it before. So just a kind of side conversation.
We're constantly adding new integrations too. I see it like
Yep.
as I host on last Friday, I hosted. We were talking with SageMaker team about the new data zone integration
Yeah.
for governance, as you were just discussing, right? So, I mean, I see it constantly happening, making it easier and easier for
Yep.
Yeah.
you know. I don't have to go in and set all this up. It
Yeah.
sets up for me. Like we were just talking with the OpenSearch team about, you know, I don't need to move data out of S3, you know, myself.
Yeah.
You know, let's AWS have that, you know, taken care of. So I
Yeah.
love that approach too, because
Yeah.
I don't want to build those things anymore.
Precisely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it simplifies things, right? That was
It
the
does.
other thing. So maybe as we were before, you know, the two of us try to summarize the integration of these two conversations. Maybe, you know, it's I'll put John and Laura on the spot here. And so can we talk a little bit about where does OpenSearch Zero ETL integration fit with for S3 fit with all of this?
I mean, specific to what we were talking about, it's a big win for governance because you know, governance is evolving, and so really the encouraged approach is to store as much log data as possible. You know, and we've got multiple sources of this, right? We've got security and access log data. We've got, if you're running a vector database, like let's say knowledge bases and Bedrock, you can start to trace through the stack of, you know, query or prompt to query to results, you know, by tracing model logging. And so really what we want customers to do is to store all this, you know, even if they're not going to use it today, maybe in like a colder archive tier, but then if they need to go back and start to look for, you know, this unanticipated result happened, I need to go back and start to understand why, they can use OpenSearch Zero ETL to go back and, you know, have this data stored and then start to do the ad hoc correlation searches to start to tie, you know, outcomes back all the way back to invocations and figure out how to fix things or where points of vulnerability might be.
Yeah. I mean, no, I was just going to say, I mean, when we had Sam here before, we were talking about, you know, some of the use cases for Zero ETL. We were talking about some of the traditional storage things of financial recording and governance. But I love your example here even more so of, you know, here we are working on generative AI models, and you have a result. Sometimes it's expected, sometimes it's unexpected, but instead of just tossing away that unexpected result, it's also important to retain it in this case, especially when you're just getting started doing your generative AI, because sometimes you don't necessarily know why, or you think it's an anomaly, and sometimes it's really important when you do store it, because now you can come back and say, now I have another instance of receiving the same kind of data. We could do a comparison, and if you had gotten rid of it, you're now like, it's that thing of, hey, Laura, do you remember that time back in, you know, 2005 where we had?
Absolutely not. I
Right?
absolutely do not. But this is part of those learnings, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not a failure. It's a learning.
Well, these learnings are really real. This is, I mean, genuinely, we joke about failure or learning here, but these learnings really contribute to the success that you're going to have going forward as well in the generative AI space, because you're looking for some of these comparisons. You need the past data to be able to determine kind of how to make an accurate decision as well going forward.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Going forward, can I ask a question here? I'm a
Sure.
DevOps guy. Thank you.
All
Mark.
right.
I appreciate your
I know.
permission. I would never do it without your permission. I wouldn't.
That's what I'm here for.
I'm a DevOps guy, so this world's a little foreign to me. But what's not foreign to me is, okay, we've established our strategy around our data. We've done our experiments. We're ready to launch. We're ready to go to production. That's my world, right? Okay. What challenges am I facing when I want to bring my first generative AI application into production? Like, and how does AWS help with that?
I mean, the first challenge you're going to face is obviously just tying all these pieces together, right?
Absolutely.
And really making it robust and, you know, ultimately looking at is it operating successfully? And this, once again, comes back to a log analytics problem in a lot of ways, right?
It is, yeah.
You know,
yeah.
all roads lead back to searching those logs. Right?
I told you
But-
in the last segment, every Friday night, that's my Friday night. Just
Yeah,
looking,
no.
reading all my logs from the week. I just
So
love it.
Laura is correctly shaking her
Thank
head,
you, Laura.
going,
I'm
"I
sorry.
don't."
That's very sad. I'm very sad to hear that.
I'm joking. I
Maybe,
would never.
maybe you just need better tools.
Exactly.
I
exactly.
love the segue.
That's good.
Exactly.
There you go.
So maybe could we talk a little bit here as we're getting further here in this segment, but can we talk about some of the differentiated solutions from AWS that are offered here that can help with customer success patterns or help create success for our customers here?
Absolutely. And, the thing to keep in mind is this is a journey. And when we started talking about Bedrock and making it easy to build your first Gen AI applications, ultimately, we anticipate more and more customers are going to use more of their data and even start building their own models and maybe even their own purpose-built foundation models specific to their domain. We're certainly doing fine-tuning of existing models or pre-training. And so, that's where the portfolio really broadens up. And I think Laura has a few points of view on that.
I have many points of view on that. Absolutely. So the further people go, into I've got this really high value data, and I'm going to move up the food chain from prompt engineering through RAG through refining to model building and training. The more they can bring that private data to bear on a really specific type of outcome that they want. And the more likely they are to move into the realm of a managed environment where they're doing a lot of their own building, or a semi-managed environment like SageMaker is a framework, but a lot of their own tools coming in, or even a do-it-yourself environment where they're putting together their own compute and storage. So the further you get into customization, the more you're going to look at the different options. You may end up all S3 all the time, all fully managed solutions higher up in the stack, but you may also start looking at, well, I'm trying to bring in a lot from my legacy environment on premises. I'm using a lot of open source tools, a lot of open source frameworks. And those things are going to demand different types of data semantics in some cases. Some of them are even going to have things like POSIX requirements, where you're going to want to be consuming things in a file format rather than an object format. Now, what do? Your gold data is in S3, an object store. All of your organization, all of your privacy, your security considerations are managed in S3. Wouldn't it be nice if I had integrated file options on top of that would work with my traditional tools that my data scientists are used to, right? So we see a kind of a split here. Some customers who are training their own models, and of course they're wildly successful, so they get big really fast, they're doing it all on S3 and streaming data directly off S3 or into local instance memory, et cetera. Or they're adding a file layer in front of their object storage, and they're pulling data into that file layer. And typically what they're doing is they're using a really high performance shared file system to do this, so all the nodes in their clusters for training can access the same data at the same time. So these are kind of two roads, and the split is largely determined by what folks are most comfortable with historically, and also there are some trade-offs between them about what people are trying to achieve.
I think we're going to have to let our audience go travel that road alone, because we have to move on to our next segment, unfortunately.
Okay, great.
Laura and John, thank you for joining us. We're going to drop some links in for people getting started with ML on AWS. Stick around for more. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Thank you both for joining us.